That is so nice of you. Thank you so much for hosting my stream, Julia V, to 0 subscribers there, but that's okay, no problem. Thank you so much for joining me, everyone. And thank you for hanging in there. I know I had a bit of a technical glitch here, glitch//hitch. Yes, it's just so many interfaces. Plus, I was editing another chapter in Brian's audiobook. Very well. We're up to chapter 21 now. And I hope he liked it. He gave me a very nice compliment via email. He says, "You're reading the book as if you've written it." So that's, thank you so much for that compliment there, Brian. Very nice. Brian also gave me the idea for a title of the animation that we're going to make in this exciting live event today on Friday, on the summer solstice day, by the way. This is the longest day in the Northern Hemisphere. I would imagine it's also the shortest day in the Southern Hemisphere. So that means in the Northern Hemisphere, from here on in, from tomorrow onwards, thank you so much. Yes, Ego. It's, very much Stranger Things there, isn't it? And yes, thank you. So that means from tomorrow onwards, our days will become shorter again, which is, not so nice. But hey, first of all, I want to say something to my friend on Facebook, Alistair Montgomery. He is currently in hospital, and my heart goes out to him. I hope you're going to be doing okay, buddy. Just in case you're watching, in case they have given you an internet connection there, just a bit of background there. Alistair is a type 1 diabetic. He's recently had a double kidney transplant, which is phenomenal. Surviving that, amazing stuff. He was just being released from hospital, and then an infection kicked in, which was terrible. So now he's back in Hammersmith Hospital there. Indeed, ouch. And he's hopefully hanging in there. They're peppering him with literally every single antibiotic. So from all of us across the pond, hang in there, buddy. You can totally do this. And I hope you enjoy my book. Maybe it'll give you some hope while you're there in the darkest nights of the hospital. It is terrible. I've been there. Many of us have been there, and it's just much less fun than it sounds. So every message on Facebook, every comment, every like on Facebook, that really helps. So hang in there, buddy. We believe in you. We love you, Al. There we go. Some other big news, of course, in the Poserverse, as they say. Bondware, the company that runs and operates the Renderosity website, has purchased Poser. That's crazy stuff. The exciting bit about this, in case you didn't know this, the implication, I know, the implication of that is that it now puts Bondware in the same situation as, or in the same position as DAZ currently is. They have the content brokerage for DAZ content, and DAZ also make the software for the content that you're supposed to use it with. And the Poser universe was very fragmented there for many, many years. So it looks like Smith Micro have finally divested themselves of some of those creative assets and focus more on their business-related software, like, I don't know, zip file creators or whatever it is they do. The creative side of things was always a bit of an add-on for them. There was this time in which they purchased the Clip Studio Paint from Japan, from Celsius, and marketed it as Manga Studio in the West. They also had Anime Studio, which has then been renamed to Moho. They also had the Motion Designer, and I think all these programs are kind of gradually gone away to other people. And I believe that's exactly what Poser needs, a new owner that can take care of putting Poser into a new direction and bringing the content marketplace and the software together and hopefully deliver one good package. It could work out really well if Bondware can find the coders that can take care of Poser, but only time will tell. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. By the way, we're going to make a little animation today, and I have prepared this for you. Let me see. I've uploaded this guy a couple of days ago. This is, if I just can I make that full screen? Oh, that was the wrong key, of course. There we go. Ha! There, let's make that full screen and play this guy back. This is what we're going to be making today. Perhaps not the whole render, but look at him go. This is inspired by something that... This is inspired by something that I did last week, a stream about the D-Force hair engine, or the new sort of whatever Garibaldi add-on that is happening in DAZ Studio right now. And that is something that DAZ Studio has been lacking for a while, namely the hair engine. And so I experimented with this very successful stream. There are over 1,000 views in 1 week. That's a lot for me. And then I discovered, and I remembered actually, that Carrara also has a fabulous hair engine, and this is what I've made with it. It was about 4,000, 5,000 frames in total to render, and a bit of post-production. I rendered this in 60 frames a second as well, so there's a link in the description that you can, Disco Chewy, that's him, that you can have a look at the 60 frame version. It looks very, very cool. It takes forever to render, but I had 3 HP Z machines doing all the work for me while I went and did my day job. So there we go. Oh, look at that. He comes again. Very exciting. So what we're going to do today then, and to answer your question, no, Patrick, I haven't done the motion capture myself. These are actually aniBlocks. To be more specific, they're very old aniBlocks as well. So they are things that I've bought a while ago that work together with Victoria 4 as well as the Genesis 1 figure. I don't know if they work with Genesis 2, but I'll explain the implication in a moment. So this is done by creating this animation through aniBlocks in DAZ Studio. And then just applying an unclothed character, turning that into keyframes and exporting that file, taking it into Carrara, and then applying the hair. And without doing many adjustments, I mean, you can see that this guy, the blue guy, he has bigger, thicker kind of bristles almost than the next guy, which is the orange fluffy guy. And he has this guy, so he has kind of thinner hairs, and that's, I believe, the default setting there. And that's going to be applied to the whole character, and literally Carrara can read that file with all the motion capture in it and everything. And then we're going to let Carrara drape the hair, apply some shaders, and I'm not going to render out the whole animation, of course, but I'll tell you how to get on with this and introduce you a little bit to the hair engine that we have in Carrara, if you like. Yes, he is so fluffy, isn't he? Brian actually gave me the idea for the title here. He said there's something, I totally forgot what it's called now. Kimokawaii, that's it, exactly. Kimokawaii is a Japanese term for something that's both cute as well as gross at the same time. So there we go, that's exactly what that means. And we're going to totally see if we can make this little guy happen here. There. I think that's a good idea, isn't it? While all that while, I'm going to keep an eye on the chat. So if I'm kind of looking away, I'm not looking away from you, I'm just looking at the chat. Let's begin with DAZ Studio 4.11 and a little bit of aniBlock action here. Also, does everyone have coffee, by the way? Very important, a cup of coffee. Julia's here with me as well, of course. Julia has just cycled across the Venetian Causeway, so she's a little bit hot and sweaty right now. So I hope she's going to calm down a little bit here. That's cool. Rod, you get coffee. We're going to get a little bit of an animation going here. Here's my pointing device. There we go. So it is about animate as well as the timeline. So let me start there perhaps. There's these aniBlocks that you can drag in. Yeah, iced coffee is a good idea actually. We do have one in the... Do you want iced coffee, Julia? No? Ice water, she says. Julia's not a coffee fan. It's one of those things. So animate is essentially a non-linear animation in DAZ Studio. And you can access that down here. Fresh installation of DAZ Studio comes with a 30-day trial version, which will then say Animate 2. And as soon as that runs out, it'll transition into the light version, which is called Animate Lite. So if you don't see Animate 2 down here, you probably have the light version. And you can buy that from the DAZ store. I think for what we're doing today, we don't need the full version. But just to let you know, there is a difference between them. One of them is that the full version can export the MDD file format. So if that's necessary for what you're doing with animations, then the full version will help you there. I believe the light version can't do that. And there's some other things that have to do with creating aniBlocks that are only available in the full version. But I hope we don't need to use that, and you can follow along with the light version. So I'm using... Oh yes, so everything down here on the Ani timeline, these blue things, they're aniBlocks. And if you have a character in here and you hover over this, then the character kind of animates. Let me show you what I mean. I'm using the Genesis 1 figure for this venture. There's nothing stopping you from getting aniBlocks for Genesis 3, Genesis 8 and all that. But Carrara, and that's where I want to use it, doesn't understand those file formats natively. And although I could export this as an MDD sequence into literally any program, I'm choosing to use this DAF format, which is the DAZ Studio universal file format, and Carrara understands that. So if I use a figure that Carrara knows and can deal with, like Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, then I'll have a really good time mixing and matching those file formats there. But let's start with a character. Let's go and use Genesis, literally just Genesis. Is that even installed in here? Oh, it looks like it isn't. That's not so good, is it? Let's bring that in, shall we? So maybe a good start. Well, actually, I can do that directly from within DAZ Studio, can't I? So I'll see if Genesis starter stuff is available. There it is. Yes, it's not installed. Okay, cool. Let's go and make that happen. So double click on this, and DAZ Studio should install this auto-magically, if I'm really lucky. There we go. So this gray window now is turning into a colored window, and anything that's grayed out you own, and anything that's in color here you own, and it's installed. And anything that isn't even showing up you don't own, or it's not installed. So I've got Genesis 2 and 3 and 8, but I didn't have Genesis 1 on this computer. So good place to start. Yes, I've heard that, Alien. Actually, the hot drinks during hot weather, that's supposed to kind of make you sweat less. And conversely, cold drinks in cold weather, that's supposed to warm you up. I can't quite believe that. Crazy stuff. Will only be a moment. And then we'll have Genesis to play with. Genesis 1, the first generation of Genesis, is, if you don't know this, Genesis was introduced about, help me out here guys, about 10 years ago perhaps? I don't remember. It's been a long time ago, and it was the replacement for the DAZ folks for Victoria 4. That was the next version from Victoria 4 upwards. So Genesis, much like Genesis 2, 3 and 8, were the base figures, and the first time they brought out Genesis, they brought this thing out as an androgynous thing. So this is Genesis here, and these are the basic shapes it comes with. So like with Genesis 2, 3 and 8, there's the base figure, and then there's morphs like Victoria on top of that. And with Genesis 1, this used to be Victoria 5. So Victoria 4 was the first thing, and then after that was like Victoria 5, Genesis 2 was Victoria 6, Genesis 3 was Victoria 7, and I guess then to bring the numbers in line, Genesis 8 is now in line with Victoria 8 and Michael 8. So that's why that is. But the interesting thing about the Genesis first generation was that they had a really cool idea. Sadly, 2 years later they got rid of that again. This is an androgynous character, and it can be morphed into a woman as well as a man, or a child, or a monster. So that's very exciting about that, and game developers still use that today, because you can use one figure and turn that into whatever you want it to be. That's very clever. They've gone away from that idea because it's difficult to develop clothing content for that. So there we go. But I will probably cover that in a whole new series once the current DAZ Studio 101 series is over, which I'm still working on, I promise. There's going to be another series which will be like DAZ Studio 201, and we're going to talk about characters and the history and what you can do with all the types of characters. So that's in my mind, maybe happening later this year. With the figure selected, you can now hover over these aniBlocks, and if they fit the figure, then you will see that just hovering will give you a preview of what that's going to look like. So in our case, these are Genesis 3 aniBlocks, and they don't work with Genesis 1, which is a shame. But Victoria 4 and Michael 4 aniBlocks will work with Genesis. So let me just bring some up that will probably work. In the regular Animate folder, I think you get these for free. There's some dance aniBlocks, and then if you hover over that, then you can see, let me zoom in and see what's happening. There's the booty shake, And there's the booty shake number 2. Oh, actually, this is the bounce. So you can hover over those and see what kind of tickles your fancy, what dance move. That could be cool. We could use this. That's going to be a really long animation already. So you can mix and match those. Anything that you like. I think these actually come with aniBlock, with Animate. These are Genesis 8 things, so that won't work. They're just mixed in there. But yeah, just downloading the free version or the one that comes pre-installed with DAZ Studio will give you access to all these things. So anything that, if you hover on the bottom here, and anything that says G8 there, don't know if you can see that, just about, means you won't be able to use that with this figure, but it'll work with the Genesis 8 figure. It is exciting. Oh, Wolfie the Wolf, thank you so much for joining us. Very exciting. It is very exciting. So, yes, do you know what, Dreamlab? That's exactly what I do. Sometimes DAZ do sales on the Platinum Club, and then you get it for half price for another year. So I always renew mine when they have a sale like that on, and then you get Platinum Club for 35 bucks a year. So is there anything particular we should be making here with this animation? Let me know which one you prefer, and then we'll use that aniBlock. Just for demonstration, while you make up your mind, if we drag an aniBlock on here, like this doesn't work, but this one here, this one here, I can just drag that up into the Ani timeline, and this is now showing me how long that is. So that's like 4.5 seconds here. The funky thing is, if I pick another aniBlock, perhaps one that works, maybe this one, I can just drag that right next to that, and this is now an even longer aniBlock. The cool thing now is that these two will blend together like in true old-fashioned non-linear animation style. So if I play them back one after the other, then Animate will take care of the fact that these are going to blend in with one another. And there's no pops and cracks and broken animation in between there. This is very, very cool. And you can do that to as many aniBlocks as you like. So that's very, very cool. Unless, of course, DAZ Studio crashes and it doesn't want to do this anymore. Then we have an issue, which looks like we're having now. How exciting. A problem caused the program to stop working correctly. Windows will close the program and notify you if a solution is available. I'd love to see that solution. So the only reason what we can do is close this thing down. Luckily, we haven't actually gotten started here. So let's try this again. The nature of live television, isn't it? Is it even television? Do you call this stuff television? No, right? It's not even television anymore. Live stuff. There. Good thing we hadn't done anything other than just install Genesis here. So let's go and bring him in again. It even. No, they aren't, are they? Same, but the Mac is the same thing. The Mac just, I've got this problem now that things now seem to consistently stop working on the Mac as soon as I close the application. So it takes like a minute, and then a window pops up that says, "Hey, Mac OS encountered a problem," and you go, Now what? And there's just nothing else we can do there. So let's stick with dancing and see what else we can do here. Is this a good one? That could be cool to animate that. Maybe we'll do this. Let's do this. This is a nice booty shake animation. Let's do that. Yeah, let's bring that in. I will totally save it. I will totally save it as we get more into the yeah, look, in this one, a hip hop combo. Let's do that as well. That looks nice. So we're going to drag that in as well. And this now gives us an 11.5 second animation. That's kind of cool. Excellent. That's almost all we're going to do with Animate. So the only one thing, wouldn't that be nice? The only one other thing that we're going to do is I've talked about the Animate timeline here, but there's also this slider here, which is the timeline slider. And that is the traditional keyframe animation based slider. And even when I slide that, you can see that this also moves the animate timeline. So in essence, the slider is the same, but the actual timeline is a very different one. So right now, notice that we don't really see anything other than a black triangle at the very front here. And that's a keyframe. So anything that's selected up here in the scene tab that has a keyframe in the regular timeline will show up down here. But Animate currently overrides that because we're using aniBlocks. So that morphing and shaping and moving the character, that is happening on the fly. That's very interesting to do. So right now you can only move this figure because Animate is active. But if you wanted to make a change, like, you know, say at frame 30, you want to maybe move the character slightly further up, or, you know, you want to change something else like fingers or whatnot, you can't currently do that unless you mess with the aniBlock or you add another aniBlock on top of that. So what I'm going to do, that's to export this animation into Carrara that natively doesn't understand Animate. You can right-click anywhere on this thing here, on that empty space. You right-click on that, and then you get this option, Bake to Studio Keyframes. And as soon as you do that, a funky little dialog pops up that says baking transfers the information in Animate 2 to the DS timeline. Control is transferred over to the DS timelines. Don't know why we have to. Simply renabled the Animate 2 tracks when you are ready. Okay, but other than that, we just say yes. And as soon as we do that, a few seconds later, these aniBlocks are still on the Animate timeline, but watch what happens when we go to the timeline. We see lots of little black triangles. And that, of course, means that for every movement that the figure has made, we now have a proper keyframe there. So everything is now keyframed, and when I move the slider, I could literally go in and examine what each parameter does at this point. So that's very important to remember, because only now are we in a situation that we can actually export the animation and make other programs understand what we've just done. So now we've locked in the Animate aniBlocks. We can even get rid of them. So I can go and select that and delete these two, because we don't use them anymore. If I drag others on top of here, it'll be overlaid on top of what we've just done with keyframes, I believe. And you know what? That is actually that is everything we've done with. Oh, there we go. Let's say we're using this until frame 345. Perfect. That is everything we're going to do with DAZ Studio really today. You could now, if you wanted to use this animation in a different program, you can now go ahead and export this as anything you like. So in our case, you have to give it a name first, but there's also tons of formats that you can try. Carrara, you can try exporting it as a poser format. Whoops, that didn't quite work. There we go. Or you can use FBX. You can use OBJ, or you can use, and this is provided by the full version of Animate, MDD by Animate 2. And MDD can be understood by Marvelous Designer, for example. So if you have Marvelous Designer and you want to animate a cloth, drape a cloth with Marvelous Designer via an animation like this, and this is a way to get this out of DAZ Studio into an MDD format. MDD, by the way, if you don't know, oh yes, Rod, don't talk about mortgage payments. Unbelievable. I've seen that you've uploaded that video. I need to watch that. It's not going well for your mortgage. That's not good to hear. Poor Rod. So MDD, by the way, if in case you didn't know, that's a series of OBJ exports on top of one another. So it's not exactly like an OBJ sequence, but it is one OBJ image that will then tell the next frame the changes of what has happened. So it's not an OBJ sequence, it's an MDD, is basically the OBJ exported, and then for the following frames it'll tell whatever program is using it the changes from the original OBJ. So you always have one OBJ that you end up with, and then a series of kind of almost like morphs per frame. That's how MDD works. A very powerful format, that, and understood by many programs. We don't need it here because Carrara natively understands DAZ Studio's DUF format. So I'm going to go and just simply save the scene as a regular scene preset, or just a regular scene. It's not even a preset, it's just a scene. And I'm going to go and create a new folder here, and we're calling it, what are we going to call it? Fluffy Dancer. Let's do that. Fluffy Dancer. Dacna? Not exactly. Bob, yeah, exactly. We can't call everything Bob, you know. We're going to call him Fluffy from DAZ so that we know what's going down here. Only takes a second to save, and that's really all we need to do with DAZ Studio. We'll just minimize it in case we need to come back to that. Dancing Chewy, I think that's a great name for the for him. And now we'll head over into Carrara. Carrara, in case you are interested in it, is currently on sale, by the way, for like 80% off or something. I think the asking price is something along the lines of $350, which you know, is a little bit sneaky to ask that much for a program that hasn't seen an update in 5 years, but I say 5 years, 10 years maybe. And no, but it's currently available for something along the lines of $60 odd. That is not bad. Sometimes it comes down even more, so you know, very cool. To Dreamlab, Elton John. That's I gotta tell you the story. It's so funny. I woke up this morning at 7 a.m. to take my medication. I have taken it, you know, so it's not the insanity speaking. I've taken that, and it's so funny. I had a dream in my half thing. I woke up, and my uncle's partner died a few years ago, Dan, and in my dream, my uncle got together with Elton John. And the two of them got married. And I don't know when, in what timeline that was, but they got married. And now that we're family, Elton, my uncle, and I, Elton John bequeathed his estate to me. And for some reason, so both my uncle and Elton John died. So I ended up with a ton of cash. And I remember sitting there with a coffee looking at the sea, and I was thinking, do you know what? Screw the cash. I'd rather want my uncle back. And Elton John. That's the vision that I woke up with. I'm glad I remember that. I'm glad you brought Elton John up because, you know, I thought I'd share that with you. Crazy stuff. Spooky, isn't it? Yes. Yes, one of those things. Rod, unbelievable. No, my uncle is alive and well. He's living in Berlin. Unbelievable. So let's go and bring Fluffy out here, Fluffy Dancer, Fluffy from DAZ. And all we need to do is literally open that scene file. This is not Carrara's native scene file, but it is something that Carrara understands along these many other formats here. So I think it was set to all files, and then you can just go and open Fluffy from DAZ. Fluffy from DAZ, file not found. That's a shame, isn't it? I shouldn't have meddled with the file system thing here. Let's try that again. Fluffy from DAZ. Fluffy Dancer, there we go. Fluffy from DAZ. Open. That's not so good that we get to see this message because that means, I'm afraid, we're going to have to do everything again that I just did. But hey, it was fun hanging out, wasn't it? This happens because I've installed the Genesis figure with DAZ Studio rather than with Install Manager. So it's kind of an interesting error that comes up. There is a difference, even though not to DAZ Studio, to all other applications that use your runtime files. There appears to be a major difference in how you install stuff. So if you ever install stuff via DAZ Studio and then you want to use the same content and make it work elsewhere, anything Lux Render, maybe even Poser, it may not work properly. So I'm afraid I can't use this because Carrara currently doesn't know that Genesis has even been installed on my system. Bad DAZ. But it's going to be all right because we're going to just go and close this down. I'm going to go open my install manager and install Genesis with that. let's see here. There, I'm going to go and search for Genesis. Genesis, isn't it? Yeah, there we go. Genesis could well be installed already. I think it's just called the regular Genesis Starter Essentials. And you'll see here that it's actually not coming up in the stuff that I've installed. So that tells you something's not quite worked out with whatever database, whatever shenanigans. Genesis Starter Essentials, there we go. Don't think we need the poser files, but yeah, this is the way to install it and make sure things actually work consistently. And I have a feeling that when we just install that and open the same file again in Carrara, it'll probably work. If not, we're going to go and create the animation again. It's no problem. I would probably follow the mixer stream, David, just because the delay is much less there. Yes, Christina, I've noticed that. That Carrara regular is cheaper than Carrara Pro. Sorry, the other way around. That Carrara Pro is cheaper than Carrara regular. I would always recommend to go for the Pro version. It has some other tools that are very handy. I think hair is available in both versions, but things like texture painting and some UV unwrapping options, they're only available in the Pro version. But sometimes it's coming in even cheaper. So it is. I've seen it on sale for something along the lines of $10. I mean, that doesn't happen very often. But if you combine it with coupons, I think $50, $60 is still very much worth the price, in my humble opinion. Let's go and see what happens if Carrara can now open that file, that it's installed properly. That's true. I totally forgot about the content. Actually, that's a good video to make about Carrara content, because that is not easy to understand. You end up with several files and it's not immediately obvious how to install them so that you get the Carrara content, which is huge. And combining that here, so there we go. Scene opened fantastically well, so that's all fine. And one other thing about this, and the Carrara is compatible with Genesis, Victoria 4, Generation 4, Genesis 1, and Genesis 2. It's not compatible with Genesis 3, but it just so happens that DAZ have a massive Genesis 2 blowout sale on the store right now. So those figures are compatible with iRay. Carrara isn't. It's got its own render engine, but a lot of the Genesis 2 content is currently iRay compatible. And it is a very, very cool idea to, if you're in the market for new content and you're on a tight budget, have a look at that. It's very much recommended. I shall do that later because there's some very cool products there, including full characters, Genesis 2 characters, and they render beautifully in iRay. So, you know, rather than spending $120 on the latest figure release, Genesis 2 wasn't all that bad. There we go. There are tools available for single poses and I believe for animations as well, Patrick. So that is possible. I don't know how difficult that is. I've never looked into that. I've got a lot of older content that I like to use, and it would be nice to use it on newer figures. So yes, let's have a look at that. I have a couple of pose converters, but they're for single poses. So I believe there is a script available that makes this happen in just for animations as well. Maybe even for aniBlocks. Even if you have to convert the aniBlock to keyframes, then do the conversion and then turn it into another aniBlock, it's not really that much work to make use of things. So we now have our animation fully working inside Carrara. So that's a huge step in the right direction. And Carrara's animation features are just so superior to those in DAZ. So like in DAZ Studio, you've got all your keyframes here. So literally for every item that you can see here, a keyframe has been created at every frame. It's very exciting. But with Carrara, you can also pick up a keyframe and move it somewhere else, and click on that keyframe. You can do so many things. Carrara has its own non-linear animation thing, but we're not going to talk about that today. For now, we have our Genesis figure, and it's all totally awesome that he can now dance inside Carrara. So let's see how we can make hair grow on top of this guy, because after all, that is what this is all about. Like in every animation that you're dealing with, make sure when you make changes to something that you want to persist for the rest of the animation, make sure your playhead is on frame 1. Very important. If it's on frame 4 or 5 or wherever, or 5th second or whatnot, and you make a change, then that will create a keyframe. And if you have an empty scene, it's really easy to see where you've made that mistake. But if you've got something like this, that's really tricky to see which keyframe was it that's actually screwed up my animation. So very important to go to the very first frames, frame 0 we call that. And now you can make changes. So if I wanted to make his head bigger or whatnot, I can do that on frame 0 and it'll persist for the rest of the animation. Do you know what? Speaking of that, it may actually be a good idea. It's something I hadn't done in the previous in the fluffy animation here. These guys are literally just the head of the regular Genesis figure. So I'm thinking maybe this guy could probably benefit from a slightly larger head, just to offset his features a little bit more, especially the guy following that, like this guy here. I think if we just accentuate the head a little bit more, make it bigger, I think that would probably look even funkier. Yeah, Patrick, if you have the hair engines, that's right. If you have the pose converter, then maybe you may be able to write a script. So there may be like a script available that will literally create this on every frame. That would be perfect. Woo, thank you so much, David. Very nice of you. That is very nice. Woo, look at him go. I always love the little guy walk. Thank you so much for your super chat donation. That's awesome. Thank you so much. Let's see what we can do in order to make this guy's head bigger and then grow some hair on him. So in the bottom right corner, we've got our scene navigator here in Carrara. And currently everything is open. But let me just close all this down. You see the Genesis figure like you do in DAZ Studio, should I say. But you also have this new thing called the Actor tab. And that's the one that has the skeleton of the figure. So that's not the same as the hip, which is usually the one that contains the root bone for the skeleton that's inside the figure. We have an additional thing, which is the Actor tab. And those two things are enclosed in the Genesis tab, if you will. And that's important to remember, because usually when we drag something in DAZ Studio onto the figure, we only ever have, say, Genesis, and then we start with the hip right after that. But in Carrara, we have this actor thing in between, and that's where we need to apply things to from our content library. Just so that you've heard that. Thank you. I almost forgot. Maybe we can look into that together, because I always wanted to do DAZ scripting, and I just never had the courage to even look into that. In our case, we need to drill down into the hip, though, so that we can see where this person's head is. There we go. That's the head over here. And we should be able to find a few parameters up here. There should be something along the lines of a head shape. That's head twist. That's not what we're looking for. Maybe we do need to go onto the actor tab and see if we have anything relates to head. There we go. Basic male head. Oh, those are the morphs that will shape this guy's head, but that's also not what we're looking for. I think perhaps we're just going to look on the parameters. Parameters, there we go. No, not parameters. What are we looking for? Motion, there we go. That's the one. Yes, I think we're looking for that. We're just looking at the head. So selecting the head, I think we can just scale that. That should work, shouldn't it? Translation, rotation, scale. There we go. And see if we can make that overall, just add a 0, make that 10 times bigger. No, look, that didn't work. Yeah, should have done that perhaps in DAZ Studio. Yes, actually that didn't work. Maybe I can try the regular scaling thing. What's that noise, I wonder? Oh, there we go. Let's make that a bit bigger. There we go. Regular scaling tool did the trick. Does it hold its shape while he's dancing around? It does. Okay. It's a good start. See what's happening here? My camera is now moving because I dared to reposition the camera on another frame. So this is the trap. This is literally the trap that can happen. And it happens to all of us. I didn't mean to do that, but I can probably get rid of that by just looking where that camera is. And there it is. And these are the two keyframes that I've made there. And it's kind of easy to just go ahead and delete them because I didn't want that camera to move. That is a nightmare in DAZ Studio, but in Carrara it's actually not an issue. So it's more built for animation. Oh, there we go. I just wanted to zoom out a little bit to show you how he goes ahead and dances with that larger head. Bobble head, I think. That is an idea, and then we can put it on the App Store. Charge 99 cents. Also make the fart app, because that, that worked really well. Oh, in DAZ, yeah. Yeah, that should work. I mean, especially because we've got in DAZ Studio, have we still got it open? No, we don't have it open anymore. But the Genesis figure comes with a basic child, so that's probably a good idea to do that. Yeah, go ahead. So, but let's talk about hair. How do we get hair on this thing? Well, Carrara has super exciting features up here under the insert menu. So there's a few primitives here, sphere, cube, cone, and so forth. The further you get down, text element, formula, metaball, object, and all that, you get to insert terrains, plants, clouds, and you can insert hair. Can you see that here? Just about here, there we go, cool. You can insert hair, or oceans, or literally lights and everything. It's all from the insert menu. So in our case, we're just going to insert a hair object, and as soon as we do that, it lurks about in our scene tab over here. But no hair has grown in the scene yet. So if we wanted to apply the hair on the whole object, like a cube, a sphere, or a person, in fact, all we need to do is open Genesis up here, make sure the actor tab is exposed, and then we're going to drag the hair onto the actor tab and then just let it go. And look what happens to my guy here. Tons of hair on the creepy character. And it's done that because it doesn't really know if I wanted to apply the hair on specific parts of the body or not. In my case, I want to do that, but it shows me not only guide hairs, but literally the full figure, which is kind of cool. If I want to go and make a change to that, I can head over here to the model tab. So these are all kind of the rooms. They're akin to what you may know from Poser or from Bryce or other programs, that in this room here you assemble stuff. Even Blender follows that mythology in a way. And this is where you model stuff. And this thing is kind of context sensitive, so no matter what, depending on what is selected, if it's a vertex object, it'll drop you into a vertex modeling mode. But in our case, it'll drop us into the hair modeling mode. Or you could have a replicator that would then let you set up replication options or terrain generator options. So it kind of depends what happens when you click on this thing. In our case, it gets us into this. That gives us a little menu here that we can have a look at. It's asking, do I want this UV based or geometry based? In case I have an object that doesn't have any UVs, I can make that geometry based. I'm going to accept the defaults here, UV based and texture map, because I have both of these. I'm not going to do much in here, but I can certainly show you what you'd need to do if you wanted to make sure to only apply hair to the head or the scalp of this figure. You can go and paint that. Green means everything is currently selected, so I can go ahead and clear the whole selection, and then this thing turns gray. And gray means no hair group is selected. The hair groups are up here. You can have several hair group in a single hair object. That's very cool. And you can now go ahead and start painting whoops, actually with that goal, it's lasso, I guess I can do that. Or I can go and select by shading domain. So I could literally go and pick this guy's, I don't know, cornea and grow hair on the cornea. That's terrible. But, or I can, and then that'll get me a selection, for example, I don't know, skin torso, for example. And then that will select the torso, and I can now take stuff away from there. And wherever it's green, that's where hair will be created. And wherever it's gray in this hair group means hair won't be created. I want, in fact, my hair to be created everywhere. So I'm going to go and select everything just like it was. And that's almost all I need to do here in that hair room. So there's a ton of hair tools up here. These are similar to the ones that we've seen in the DAZ hair engine that's just come out last week. So you can cut hair, curl hair, clump hair. This is all here. It just flows a little bit faster and a little bit better. If you wanted to create your own hair, you can do that here. Add more hair, remove hair, cut it, and put density more or less and all that. So this is all available here within Carrara. I'm just going to go and have a look at the hairs per group, because we only have a single hair group. I want to make it simple here. Hair count, I just want to crank up the density a little bit more. So currently that's set to 5,000. I think that's the default. And I'm going to make that maybe 20,000. And that'll mean there's more hair growing on our little guy. Segments per hair is another interesting thing I want to tell you about. That is good for curling hair. So if you look at this, you can probably see that the hair is in 4 segments, because that's what I've done here. So this is one segment, looks like a finger. It's the second one, third one, and there is a fourth one that attaches to the figure. If you want to have more realistic curling in the hair, you can increase the segments of the hair. So that's basically how many bones do you give each strand of hair. That's what that does. And if you wanted to make that finer, then of course the simulation will take a lot longer, but also the realism will be cranked up quite a bit. I'm going to leave it on 4. The only other thing you can do here, I want to bring your attention, is you can have a different mode between short hairs and long hairs. And I think the orange guy here, he has long hair, and the other guy, the blue guy here, he has short hairs. So that sets the mood for what you want to do with hair. So they call it a hair engine, but really you can also use this for grass and bristles and carpet furs and all kinds of things. So that's all we need to do here. I'm going to go back into the assembly room. That is very, very funny, David. Very funny. We can see that our guy has a lot more hair now than he did before. Perhaps I'm going to go save it, because Carrara also has this thing about crashing. So let's go and save our scene before any of that happens. Fluffy dancer. What did you say, Alien? What was that? Alien said something really funky about what we should call that. Do you remember what that was? Julia's just looking through the chat. Dancing Chewy, there we go. Chewy. Oh, come on. Chewy, there we go. That's what we're going to call him. Excellent, thank you. I'm going to make sure I'm going to save all these settings internally. That's another very helpful Carrara thing. You can use local settings. You can save all externally or save everything internally. So if you're bringing in geometry and you want to render this on another computer, that may not have the same references to wherever your objects are located. So local settings and save externally, that basically creates reference links to wherever those objects are stored on your vast array of hard disks that are connected to your Windows network. But if you say use internal settings, save all internally, then that means everything's going to be chucked into the Carrara file. You have a single file that you can render on any computer on which Carrara is installed. It makes life a lot easier. You can put comments as well, and you can hit save, and that is that. So once we're done here, you can have access to that file if you're one of my Patreon supporters. So you'll be able to download that file and examine exactly what's going on. If you like the look of something, or if you want to make your own adjustments, you can totally do that, and it should all work. There. So now that the whole figure has hair, which could be trimmed here at the top and all that and stuff, the hair is not draped currently. Even if I go and walk through this animation, first of all, it's not going to happen in real time now, but the hair is just going to stick out from the normals. That's a cool picture to render there already. This very exciting. But the hair is not draped, so it kind of sticks out as if it wasn't obeying gravity's rules. And we can do that. Go back to the first frame of the animation, and with the hair selected, we go to the General tab. I'm still chuckling at the Actor tab is exposed. Hello, Finn123. Thank you so much for following. I appreciate that. So with the hair selected down here and the General tab exposed, we can now set some of these things like we did in the hair tab there. So there's large, thin, medium large, and extra large, or very large, and that should change how our hair appears in the render. So I'm going to leave it on large now, but the really interesting tab is the simulation tab over here. Let me just make that slightly bigger. I hope you can see all that. Yes, you can. Even though my face is kind of in the middle there, but it's cool. It's cool. So we have these. Actually, it's not cool. Is it? Is this better? Yeah, maybe this is better. You've got the simulate button here. Oh, actually, I've got an even better idea. We can do that. Do that. Do that. Yes. How exciting! There we go. So we've got the simulate button. And we've got the drape all button here. So those are two options, and they're very different. Simulate means simulate the hair, drape the hair on the current frame before you get started. Whereas drape all means Carrara will take a long time going through every single frame of the animation and adjust the draping of the hair at that point. So with animations, there's no good having to drape the hair once and then leave it in place, because our character moves. And what makes these animations really, really cool, like my Chewy animation here, is that while he's moving, the hair literally falls around into all types of directions. And that's what's so cool about this. And that's what Carrara can do. So the first thing we do is we drape the hair so that the animation starts from a well-draped position. And then we're going to click the drape all button, and that'll go through every frame of the animation so that all the hairs now float around like we want them to. It's good sound. This is by the Rondo Brothers, by the way. It's a song called Puffer, interestingly. Oh, my goodness, what a shame. Thank you, Julia. It wasn't on the screen, what a shame. I've only shown you like a quarter of the funky animation. That's just, that's ridiculous. So yes, that's what I was saying. The hairs move around while the whole character is moving around. And so we can do that with these two things, simulate and drape all. And the first thing we're going to try is simulate. We're going to go and save before we even attempt to do that. It takes quite a while. A lot of keyframes, a lot of data, a lot of geometry already in this file. And now let's go and simulate the hair and watch what happens to the hair. I'm going to go and zoom in a slight bit more here so that we can see that. I'm on frame 0 still. That's important. Be on frame 0 when that happens. And now we can see that the hair is kind of going away. Carrara saying simulating hairs. And you can see that these yellow things appear. And those are guide hairs. And oops, I'm so sorry. I've used the wrong button. Look at that. I was going to press drape all instead of simulate. I think I've just told you the wrong way around there. Hit escape if that happens, and Carrara should stop simulating and let you start again. So what I wanted to do is literally say drape all rather than simulate. Drape all is the one that goes fairly fast. So sorry about this, I'm confused. There we go. Drape all will not move the animation forward. It will just drape the hairs in place as they are. And that's how our character looks like. A little bit wet now. And once we've done that, now we can say simulate, and that will now from this position start going through the animation and literally simulate all the hairs as they go along. So this could take a while, but it'll be worth it, because after however long it takes, once 12 seconds have been simulated, should have really chosen a shorter animation there, shouldn't I? But hey, one of those things. good time for Q&A. No, this is not a stupid question, David. It's a very very important one actually, because Carrara doesn't actually care about your GPUs. It's purely CPU based thing. So GPU is only used to display the picture, but the whole rendering is being taken care of by the CPUs. So fast Xeon processors are your friend, and it also means if you don't have a good GPU, you can still get good results with Carrara. It might take a little bit longer, but yeah, real-time preview is not generated by the GPU. Very good question. There are plugins for it's just an Patrick. It's not a. It's just an extra thing that Carrara puts in. So if you usually in DAZ Studio you select the figure, and under it comes up hip and all that. So if you then select the figure and you apply a pose to it, then the pose will be applied to the character. If you try that in Carrara, it doesn't work. I don't know why it does that, but Carrara just has this extra kind of group, I guess, which is the actor group. And if you select the actor group and then apply a pose, then it'll work. Some parameters are just not exposed on the Genesis tab, they're on the actor tab. Don't know why, but that's all there's to it. David, there is speaking of GPUs, it is an interesting one. There are plugins available for Carrara. One of them is called Luxus for Carrara. Another one is Octane for Carrara, and that lets you use this front end and all the kind of replication and generation things that Carrara has built in, and then use GPU rendering with these things. That is possible. So Luxus is a plugin that's available from the DAZ store, currently $30, I think, and that's not on sale right now, and that will then utilize LuxRender, open source GPU and CPU rendering engine that can get funky results much faster than Carrara, and your CPU could probably produce it. Also means you have to deal with a new shader setup, but yeah, that's possible. Same goes for Octane. If you are familiar with Octane, you can get a plugin for Carrara that will utilize the Octane render engine from this front end. Very cool. Any other questions? Now's the time to ask. We can always just stop the animation here. I mean, you kind of get the gist of what it does. It should have probably simulated the first 4 seconds here for us. It's probably enough to demonstrate what's going on. So I'll go and hit escape, hoping that if I go and scroll through this thing, it will show me the draped hair in all these positions. Yeah, it looks like it does that. Perfect. So if we maybe stick with this position here, we can see how to get a suitable picture out of Carrara here. That's a good question, Dreamlab. I would love to know the answer to that as well. Because I've heard stories that people who, sometimes the client, if it's about 2D work, that you're using 3D programs and you're creating 2D work with it, sometimes the client really doesn't care what we use, and that is, it can kind of work in our best interest, because we can just use the tools that we find most suitable. I've heard of a story of a guy who was using Carrara for professional animation work, and the client was asking him, so what did you use for that? And he said, well, I used Carrara. And they said, I've never heard of Carrara. What is that? And he goes, well, you know, doesn't really matter what it is. It just means this is how I did my my animation, which is your product. This is what you wanted. And they said, yeah. And then they found out what that was, and they thought, oh my God, really? We had expected you to use package X, Y, and Z, and it turns out that wasn't necessary. So I've just framed up the camera here in frame 0, and I'm going to go and pick a nice frame. It looks perhaps slightly less wild. That's kind of a nice wild thing. And I'll go and save this before anything else happens here to us. And then I can, just like in DAZ Studio, I can press Ctrl R to kick off a render. That'll happen with the default light, and that's probably not the look and feel we want, but I'll show you how to get started with that anyway. Actually, let's go over to the render room and set some parameters, just making sure, yeah, 1280 by 720 is cool. We also want to render the current frame. We don't want to render the whole animation, just the current frame. And those render options here are all default right now. So Control R will go ahead and render that for us. It's a very good point, Dreamlab, and it's partly why I'm bringing up Carrara, because DAZ Studio is really not that suitable for animation. It really lacks the tools, even though there are several plugins that you have at your disposal. It really is very limiting when it comes to tweaking your animation. So that's where other tools really come in handy. So we see a picture, it doesn't look great, and that's because it's rendered with a default light. Let's go and change over to the director's camera. We have the light over here, that's our scene light up here, and that is just pointing just blandly at the scene. I'm going to go and use a modifier to point that at our character, point that at the actor here. And that now means that when I move my light, it will adjust itself to point always at my character, which is nice. It only does that when I let go of the movement. So that's one thing I can do. There's a few other things. One of them is that currently my guy isn't dancing on anything, so it's just an empty floor here. It's probably going to work if I don't show the floor. I could bring in something of a background. That is possible. Let's do that. Let's see how that works. It's under the scene tab. Literally the scene, the word scene itself is actually a thing that you can click. And when you do that, you have other options. For example, the atmosphere tab here. And you can select realistic sky. That's what I like doing. Click realistic sky. That enables the ground. We'll leave that enabled for now, but you can also edit the parameters here. And that's very, very cool. Gives you a little scene preview here when you hit auto refresh and render of what your scene is going to look like. This knob here lets you position the sun. It's very cool. You can tweak it. Currently it's kind of 12 o'clock coming straight from the bottom, but you can also move that wherever you like. So somewhere into the back here means you can't catch the sunrise or the sunset. You can even make the sun itself appear. So it's a very cool way of quickly adjusting light. And if you find something that you like, leave it like that. It brings in some clouds here. It's just default clouds. They're generated down here on the atmosphere tab. So we've got one that's just atmosphere here with global brightness, haze altitude, and haze density, and several other things you can control, like sky color. Perhaps we want our sky to be, maybe a bit more sci-fi purple here. We can do that here. But on these other tabs, they're basically like layers of how you want the atmosphere to look like. The second one here is fog and sunbeams. You can enable fog, and that means you get more fog in the background. You can play with that. Sunbeams can be enabled. But other things in cloud include 4 cloud layers here. So first cloud layer currently has auto stratus clouds. Actually, can I make that a bit bigger? Yeah, there we go. That's probably a good idea. And then bring that down a bit so we can all see it. Oops. Yeah, it's maybe too big. There. Let's leave that. So you get to see a few of those clouds here. I can change that from auto stratus to cirrostratus, and then the type of cloud in the background changes. That's kind of cool, isn't it? Or you can just put cloud, like little nice and fluffy clouds. Funky thing, you can even enable a second layer and then layer 2 types of clouds on top of one another. So that gives you a really realistic kind of thing here. Altostratus and cirrostratus together, maybe. That's kind of a cool background. So you can change all these things. All these things, I believe, can be animated as well. Even crazier, you can animate the clouds in Carrara. So I'm going to leave that as it is and try and render again. See what that brings up now. Interesting. We can still see the gray skin underneath my character here. I could apply a skin texture, or I can just hide the character. That's another option, so that we just don't see that. I believe that's what I've done in my animation. So perhaps we're going to go and do that. Go over here, and under the actor, I'm just going to make the actor invisible. And that means the hair is still there. I could also make the hair invisible. But then, of course, we've got nothing left. So we're going to leave the hair, and we're going to invisibilize the actor. And now we shouldn't have any more grayness popping out underneath and just fluff dancing. While I'm here, I want to do one quick change. That's at the very bottom here under oh, there, tile size. That's it, isn't it? Is that tile size? Yes, tile size. The default is 128 pixels. Those are the render buckets, the little squares that come up when Carrara renders this. If you make that smaller, something like 32, watch what happens if I re-render that scene. Buckets are smaller, but it also means it renders your scene more efficiently. So you'll probably have a faster render result here, and that's because the hair takes a lot longer to render than the background. The background's rendered like that. So if you have render buckets that are finished with this, and you've got two cores rendering these things, then 80% of your computer is basically just sitting there idle. And if you make the render buckets smaller, they can all participate in this rendering. So, you know, interesting for other programs as well. Smaller render buckets mean faster renders. Keep it in mind. So we can change the color of the hair. I'll show you that quickly. For that, we need to select the hair and go to the shader tab or the texture tab here. And that now allows us to, this is the hair shader. There's a root color here and a tip color. And we can just quickly change that. The root color, maybe I'm going to make it, pick a color. What color shall we use? Blue, orange, green, yellow, pink. I'll leave it up to you. And then we're going to change those colors. Purple, Alien 1, let's make it purple. Oh, David was there before. How interesting. Well, maybe make it orange underneath with purple fringes. How's that? Let's do that. That's crazy. So orange on the bottom, like a deep orange. That's not going to look scary, is it? And auto update, we can probably and then the tip color, we're going to make that purple. Don't worry about the preview. It'll well, that's not orange, that's still brown. Whenever life gets you down, Mrs. Brown. Let's see what that looks like. Probably scary. Oh yes, loving that effect already. What do you think? That is cool, isn't it? I love it. That is very nice. Very cool. So we still see something. This is the background actually poking through here now, but I like the pose. I like the colors already. This is good. Let's save it. I'm going to make a slight adjustment to the hair in a moment, and that is how we can make the hair a bit spikier, and we can also make it fuller, and we can see what the several thickness options do, and there's also the length option, so we can make the hair shorter and spikier. We'll see what that's all about. Oh my God, she's getting married now with some guy. I've read in the Global Informer or whatever. That's what you get at the checkout of the supermarket. There's all these yellow press things, and the headlines are always hilarious. Something like, Prince Charles finally reveals the reason why Diana had to go. Queen furious and all that. Dying Queen furious and kicks Charles out of the palace and you've disgraced the family. And then next week everything's totally finding it. I don't know how they can get away with stuff like that. I have no idea. It's unbelievable. Let's see how we can do something else to the hair. So first of all, let's make it very large over here in the hair group. Very large, and make the length, instead of 1 foot, which is that's long hair, isn't it? Let's make it half a foot. 1 foot long hair.com. There we go. So that is a different look. Technically, we should redrape it so that the hairs can collide properly with one another. We're not going to do that. We're just going to go and see what the look of that is. They're very different. Very different. That's extra thick now. What else can we do? Very large. Make it very thin. Let's try that. Very thin, and perhaps make it longer. 2.5 feet. Whoa, dude. Scary. Woo. Oh. It's so thin it's not even visible. What's going down? Okay, let's make it medium. I suppose we'd have to be really close in order to see that. Or it's so long that that no one can know. Oops! Oh my goodness! 0.5 millimeter on the mouse wheel, and it goes. That's cool. Let's render this. Let's see what that looks like. Yes, we have a picture full of hair. This could take a while. Yes. So hair does take a little while to render, I guess, even on the fastest machine. Can you imagine? And then 4,000 frames like that. You go, yeah, it'll take a few weeks to do that. Well, I want to make it slightly. I'm gonna make it slightly less scary. So perhaps 1,200 feet long hair is too much, maybe. So 1.5 feet. Let's do that. Let's try that. Look at that. So you can literally see very wispy hair. I think this is so thin that we do need something underneath it now. But yeah, you can see very wispy hair up here. So it does a very good job. And I like the color combination, I must say. That's very cool. Very nice color combination. I do like that. Very cool. There's one other thing I want to try out. Maybe I'll leave it like this. I kind of like the look of this wispiness here. It is more creepy, isn't it? There's one other thing I want to do with the light, and just try it out. I'm going to select the light, and Carrara has this nice option that once you've placed the light, you can change its type. Is the word I'm looking for. So currently it's a distant light that comes in, much like the Blender cube, comes in with every scene. But the distant light can also become a different light now. So I don't have to delete it. Like in DAZ Studio, I have a spotlight and I want to make it a distant light. I have to delete the spotlight and then kind of create a distant light and put that in the same place. And not necessary. We can just change that. Like in Blender, we can just change the light type. So I can change this to sunlight. And that now means it is now kind of married to the scene settings in the realistic sky tab. So if we were to have a look at the director's camera, I think we can now see that the light has changed from the regular light tab that it was a minute ago. If I go and change that back from sunlight to distant light, which it was, so it changes its type. So you can see in the scene that it's different now. If you change that to sunlight, it is, oops, gone, first of all. There it is, it's on the bottom here. It now takes on the position. What's happening? Dude, don't do that. There. It changes its, dude, sunlight, there we go. It changes its type, and now it's kind of married to the scene tab that I've set here. So the position of the sun and this light are now kind of married. That sometimes gives really good results, sometimes does not. So in my case, I don't see that big a difference. But I'd really like to see this in motion. Perhaps I'll do that overnight. I'll render this animation out and I'll put that on YouTube, and then we can see what it's going to be like. I think I'm going to take the background away here, or the floor away, I think, or color it differently. I might even do something different to the sky, but I'll certainly leave the camera position as it is, and then we can see what else we want to do. Render options, just to bring this to a close here. Wispy Wolverine, yeah, I like that. Indirect light indirect light and skylight and full ray tracing will add a lot more render time to this, but it will also bring out the colors even more. So it's still pretty fast per frame. I'm estimating this to be about 30 seconds, perhaps 30-40 seconds per frame. And you can see that the colors really come out now, and it's a little brighter now. Yeah, let's have a think of what else we can do with the background. I'm not entirely sure if we need clouds. Perhaps we're just going to have it as a gradient, something like that. And then I will let this simulate itself and basically render it out, and then give it to you on YouTube. And I'll make this very scene file in this state, as well as in my modified state with, slightly better background things, available to my Patreon supporters. If you have Carrara, you can open it and have a look at all the funky parameters that I've set there. And then hopefully, eventually, we're going to get something exciting like this out of it. And you can, of course, create your own super exciting animations like that. I hope you liked it. I think we're going to bring this session to a close. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Don't forget that tomorrow we're going to go and play a bit more Subnautica, which was going to be exciting. We have a boat dead in the water 500 meters below at Jay's Crab Shack. That's going to be exciting. So we'll totally look at how we can revitalize that, because currently the batteries are dead and we can't go anywhere. So that's one thing. On Monday, we're super excited to play Abduction again at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're exploring Hunrath. It's by the makers of Myst. Join us for that. It'll be very cool. We'd love to have you on board. If you do have any questions, please drop them in the comments. And thank you so much for all your donations, for your subscriptions, for all your thumbs up, for everything that you do. Don't forget, we're on Discord as well. If you want to drop into Discord, I'll put an invitation out there now. Once the credits roll, feel free to join us. It'll be a Patreon perk later this year, but for now, it's open to those who are interested. My friends, take care. Bye-bye for now.